Corin Hale wiped the sweat from his brow and adjusted the straps on his exosuit as he moved through the hydroponic fields. The orbital farm hung in silence, the soft hum of life support systems the only sound. He had been checking nutrient pumps all night, but the stillness made his skin crawl. Then he heard it, a faint high-pitched cry that didn't belong to any drone or animal he knew. It came from beneath a collapsed cargo platform at the edge of the fields. His heart leapt. Without thinking, he sprinted toward the sound, boots clanging against metal grates. "Who's there?" he shouted, but the cries continued, small and urgent, almost pleading. Corin's eyes scanned the wreckage. Panels bent inward, crates toppled over, and a thin trail of shimmering scales caught the light. He froze. Something alive was trapped under the metal. He dropped to his knees, testing the weight of the debris. Sparks flared from exposed wiring. One wrong move and he could be electrocuted, or worse, crush whatever was trapped beneath. His hands shook as he lifted a corner of a heavy panel. A tiny claw scraped against his glove. A soft, desperate squeak echoed, and Corin felt a pang of panic. He pushed harder. Another cry, louder now, and he saw it. A small dragon hatchling, pale with scales that glimmered faintly green under the farm lights, struggling to free its tiny limbs. Corin's pulse raced, but fear didn't stop him. He shifted another crate with all his strength, muttering under his breath. More cries joined the first. He realized with a shock that there were dozens of them, small dragons stacked like cargo, all trapped under debris he had never noticed before. Their bodies were fragile, trembling, some weak from lack of air or light. Corin's stomach twisted. He had never seen anything like this. "All right, let's get you out," he whispered, voice steady despite the rising panic. One by one he lifted panels and crates, using his exosuit strength boosters carefully to avoid crushing the hatchlings. Each freed creature let out a tiny chirp of relief, fluttering wings that barely lifted them off the ground. Corin's heart lifted slightly with each life saved. Small, fragile victories, but they mattered. Suddenly, a deep, rumbling growl reverberated from above the field. Corin froze. He glanced up and his stomach dropped. The shadow of a massive creature passed across the hydroponic panels. Something enormous, its scales darker than night, wings spanning several meters, watched him silently. The growl came again, low and warning, vibrating through the metal beneath his feet. Corin's mind raced. Every instinct screamed for him to run, but the hatchlings were helpless. If he abandoned them now, they would not survive. His hands gripped the edge of a fallen panel. He had no weapons, only his courage, quick thinking, and the limited tools in his exosuit. With a steadying breath he whispered, "I won't let you down. Not now." The first few hatchlings climbed onto his arms, their tiny claws gentle but firm. One brushed his cheek with a shimmering scale. He felt a surge of determination. He adjusted his exosuit to lift more debris simultaneously, stacking crates to form makeshift shelters while keeping the hatchlings safe. Sparks flew from damaged panels, but Corin ignored the stinging heat. Each movement was deliberate, each decision a gamble against both the environment and the massive creature above. As the last hatchling wriggled free, Corin paused, chest heaving. He noticed something strange. The hatchling's scales pulsed softly, almost like faint signals. Were they communicating? The thought sent a shiver down his spine. He crouched, studying the small creatures as they huddled together. Something told him this was more than just a random disaster. Something, or someone, had left these hatchlings here for a reason. The shadow above shifted suddenly. Corin froze again, but this time it wasn't menacing, it was curious. A massive wing tip brushed the air, sending a gust strong enough to rattle the debris around him. The growl softened into a rumble, but the watcher remained hidden. Corin's pulse quickened. He realized that whatever was up there was intelligent, evaluating him, and possibly deciding the fate of the hatchlings. He straightened, holding two hatchlings close. The others huddled near his feet. "All right," he muttered, voice steady though adrenaline coursed through him, "let's see what we're really dealing with." He scanned the shadowed upper platforms, trying to discern movement, patterns, anything that would tell him the creature's intentions. Then, without warning, a panel above him shifted violently, and a glowing claw pierced the light, a sudden flash of emerald scales larger than he had ever imagined. The hatchlings shrieked, wings flapping in panic. Corin froze mid-step. Whatever watched him was about to make a move. And then he heard it, a low, intelligent hiss, almost like a voice resonating through the metal beams. Corin's breath caught. The creature knew he was there. It was aware. And somehow it was waiting to see what he would do next. Corin tightened his grip on the hatchlings, his mind racing through options, every second critical. The entire orbital field seemed to hold its breath. One wrong move and the fragile lives in his hands could be lost. Then a small hatchling nudged his chest with its tiny snout, and Corrin realized he had to act, not just with strength but with courage, wit, and compassion. The night was only beginning. The massive shadow shifted again, closer this time, and a single gleaming eye appeared in the darkness above. Corrin froze. What would it do? Corrin's chest thumped as he scanned the upper platforms, keeping the hatchlings close against his exosuit. The massive shadow above shifted again, and the glowing eye lingered, unblinking. It wasn't attacking, but it wasn't leaving either. Every instinct told him to run, but he knew the hatchlings couldn't survive the fall through the open fields if he tried. He swallowed hard, forcing himself to stay calm. Okay, think, he muttered. The exosuit's HUD flashed warnings. Structural integrity low on several panels, sparks from damaged wiring still crackled dangerously. Corrin needed to move the hatchlings to safety and fast. One false step and the debris could collapse further, crushing them all. He spotted a partially enclosed storage pod nearby, its doors slightly ajar. It wasn't perfect, but it could shelter the hatchlings from falling debris and the unknown watcher above. With a deep breath, Corrin took the first step, then another, carefully placing each hatchling in his arms. A tiny hiss escaped one, eyes wide and glowing faintly. Corrin whispered, "I've got you." Just a little further. The shadow above stirred. The massive wings shifted, creating a gust that sent Corrin staggering. Sparks flew from the overhead panels, sizzling along the floor. He slammed a stabilizer brace into the nearest fallen beam, steadying himself. The hatchlings clung to him, trembling but not panicking yet. Corrin's grip tightened. He couldn't afford to drop even one. Halfway to the pod, a strange phenomenon startled him. One hatchling's glowing scales pulsed rapidly, sending faint waves across the metallic floor. Corrin bent closer. "What are you trying to tell me?" The pulse seemed synchronized with the machinery, a pattern almost like a signal. He hadn't trained for this, but his mind raced. Could the hatchlings somehow interface with the farm systems? Could they control or influence the environment? Before he could test the idea, a low, resonant growl rolled across the platform above. The watcher wasn't alone. Shadows of at least two more massive forms appeared, their scales glittering faintly under the dim lights. Corrin froze, heart hammering. These were full-grown dragons, adult size, far larger than he had imagined. The air vibrated with their presence. They weren't attacking yet, but every muscle in his body tensed. He had seconds to act. Corrin sprinted the last few meters, dodging falling debris and sparks, and slipped inside the pod with the hatchlings. He slammed the doors shut and activated the pod's emergency force field. A faint hum filled the air, and the hatchlings nestled against one another, trembling but safe. Corrin's hands shook, but relief flashed through him. He had managed a small victory, at least for now. The growls outside deepened, then stopped. Corrin peered through a small viewport, barely daring to breathe. The adult dragons hovered at a distance, their eyes following his every movement. One stepped forward, tilting its head curiously, then retreated as if testing him. Corrin realized they weren't mindless beasts. They were intelligent, observing, evaluating. Corrin whispered to himself, "I need to show them. I can be trusted." He scanned the pod for anything that could demonstrate care instead of threat. The hatchlings were cold, weak, and exhausted. He adjusted the internal temperature controls, moved a nutrient gel dispenser closer and carefully fed a few. Tiny claws gripped his fingers as they drank. He felt a small spark of hope. They were responding to him, trusting him even as the watchers waited outside. Suddenly, one hatchling flapped its wings, and a faint shimmer rippled through the force field. Corrin's jaw dropped. The creatures seemed connected, not just to each other but somehow to the technology around them. Each pulse of their glowing scales sent faint vibrations through the pod systems. It was subtle but unmistakable. They were communicating, maybe even controlling their environment in ways Corrin couldn't yet understand. The adult dragons outside shifted again. A beam of moonlight, or starlight, caught one of their scales and it glimmered like polished crystal. Corrin realized they were examining him as much as he was examining them. They weren't just guarding their young, they were testing him. Every move, every gesture mattered. One wrong step and the hatchlings could die, or worse, he could provoke the adults. Corrin took a deep breath, forcing calm into his racing mind. "I can do this," he muttered. He activated the pod's internal systems to mimic natural habitat conditions, dimming lights, warming air and monitoring oxygen levels. The hatchlings relaxed slightly, their scales dimming to a soft glow. Corin's small wing gave him courage, but the danger outside remained immense. A sudden crash echoed from the field. Corin ducked instinctively. The adult dragons had shifted position, and a falling metal beam barely missed the pod. Sparks rained down, sizzling across the force field. One hatchling squeaked, wings flapping in panic. Corin grabbed it, whispering, "It's okay, I've got you." His heart pounded, adrenaline surging. Then something entirely unexpected happened. A single adult dragon lowered its massive head close to the pod, eyes locking with Corin's. Its breath was warm, scented with something sharp and unfamiliar. For a heartbeat it simply watched. Then, without warning, it let out a soft, almost questioning hiss, and retreated just enough to allow Corin some breathing room. Corin exhaled, stunned. The Watcher had made a choice not to attack. He understood in that moment that this was more than instinct. Intelligence, judgment, and evaluation. If he failed the test, the hatchlings would suffer. But if he succeeded, maybe he could earn trust. He looked down at the hatchlings, their tiny heads tilting toward him, trusting. A surge of determination filled him. "All right," he whispered, voice firm, "let's show them humans can be counted on." Outside, the shadows of the adult dragons lingered, massive and silent. Corin's eyes narrowed. The night was far from over. And then a sudden pulse of light from one hatchling's scales illuminated the pod, and the eyes outside. Something was happening, something bigger than he had realized. Corin's stomach tightened. Whatever it was just beginning. Corin crouched inside the pod, clutching two of the hatchlings close, while the others huddled at his feet. The soft glow from their scales pulsed rhythmically, sending faint light across the walls. He stared at the patterns, heart pounding. It wasn't random. Something was communicating, something deliberate. He leaned closer, brushing a fingertip along one hatchling's back. The pulse shifted, quickening as though responding to his touch. Corin's mind raced. Could they be signaling him? Or were they interacting with the pod itself? He glanced at the internal control panel. Lights blinked irregularly, machines humming slightly faster than usual. He hadn't touched anything, but the energy readings spiked in perfect sync with the hatchling's glow. A surge of realization hit him. "You're doing something," he whispered. "You're telling me something." His pulse matched theirs as he tried to focus. The tiny creatures weren't just alive, they were connected. Connected to each other, to the pod, maybe even to the farm systems themselves. Corin's mind spun with possibilities. If he could figure it out, he could use it to keep the hatchlings safe. Outside, the massive shadow shifted again. One of the adult dragons stepped forward, enormous wings brushing the field ceiling. Corin's heart skipped. Every instinct screamed danger, but he forced himself to remain calm. He had learned something important. Brute force wouldn't save these hatchlings. He needed intelligence, patience, and observation. He activated a small monitoring console and carefully began mapping the pulses from the hatchlings to the energy fluctuations in the pod. Every blink, every shimmer of their scales, seemed to correspond with systems he hadn't touched. Corin's brow furrowed. "They're communicating with the machinery?" he muttered. "Not just alive, but intelligent." Then a sudden jolt ran through the pod. The lights flickered, and the air shimmered as a soft vibration pulsed through the floor. The hatchlings chirped in unison, wings flaring. Corin stumbled back, gripping the pod wall. Outside, the shadow dragons tensed. The rumble from the adults wasn't anger, it was attention, focused. Corin's mind raced. He realized this wasn't random. The hatchlings were guiding him, or perhaps instructing him. If he could understand, he might uncover their purpose. He tapped into the pod controls, allowing the energy pulses to feed into the systems rather than resisting them. Machines hummed in response. Lights shifted, air systems adjusted, and a hidden maintenance panel slowly slid open at the far end of the pod. His eyes widened. He hadn't seen this panel before. Wires and conduits, long inactive, glimmered faintly in the hatchling's light. They had shown him the way, deliberately. Corin's hands shook as he approached. Okay, let's see what you're trying to tell me," he whispered. Carefully, he pried open the panel, revealing a console covered in symbols he didn't recognize. Alien in design, yet somehow intuitive. A pulse from the hatchlings flowed into the console, and the symbols lit up in sequence. A map of the farm systems appeared, highlighting hidden sections: tunnels, storage rooms, airlocks. Corin realized with a shock that the hatchlings had led him to safety paths, life support reserves, and emergency shelters he didn't know existed. They weren't just fragile creatures, they were guides showing him how to protect them. Corin exhaled, awe and disbelief battling adrenaline. You're trying to save yourselves? And me?" he muttered. He glanced at the hatchlings, their tiny heads tilted toward him, eyes bright with trust. His chest swelled with determination. They had given him a choice: follow their guidance or risk everything. Suddenly, a loud metallic clang reverberated through the fields. The adult dragons outside shifted, wings unfurling like sails. One stepped closer to the pod, peering in. Its eye, immense and intelligent, scanned Corrin. The soft hiss it emitted was almost interrogative, as if asking, "Can we trust you?" Corrin straightened. "Yes," he said firmly, even though he wasn't sure if the dragon understood. "I'll keep them safe. I'll do what's right." The hatchlings glowed brighter, their pulse quickening. The vibration through the pod strengthened, and the hidden console responded further, opening a small compartment filled with nutrient pods and medical supplies. Small victories but vital. The dragons outside stirred but did not attack. Instead they shifted back slightly, watching. Corrin understood this. He had passed the first test. Their intelligence was immense and they were evaluating every move, every reaction. One wrong gesture, one moment of panic and the hatchlings' trust, and the dragon's tolerance, could vanish. Corrin moved quickly, feeding the hatchlings while scanning the new sections of the pod revealed by the console. He realized the tunnels could lead them out of the open fields to a hidden safe zone he hadn't known existed. Each decision now mattered more than ever. The hatchlings pulsed faster, almost urging him onward, and Corrin followed, every step careful but deliberate. Then a new pulse rippled from the largest hatchling, and a small door at the far side of the pod clicked open. A faint breeze drifted in. Corrin froze. The adult dragons tensed outside. Whatever awaited beyond that door could either be a way to safety, or something far worse. He gritted his teeth, lifting the hatchlings one by one. "All right," he whispered, voice tight with anticipation. "Let's see what's out there." As he stepped toward the opening, a sudden shimmer of scales appeared in the shadows above, larger than any dragon he had seen yet. Corrin's breath caught. It was watching him, and whatever it was closer than he had imagined. The pulse of the hatchlings quickened again. Corrin's heart raced. Something monumental was about to happen, and the night was far from over. Corrin's boots clanged against the metal floor as he carried the last hatchling toward the newly revealed tunnel. His pulse raced, echoing the rapid pulses of the hatchlings' glowing scales. The tunnel smelled faintly of ozone and warmed metal, a scent that made his stomach twist with both dread and hope. He had no time to pause. The shadows above were shifting, wings brushing the edges of the field with gusts that could knock him off his feet. Suddenly, a massive section of the overhead panel collapsed with a deafening crash. Sparks flew everywhere, arcing dangerously close to the hatchlings. Corrin dove to shield them, rolling across the metal floor. One hatchling squeaked, tiny claws scraping his arm, and he hugged it tightly. Pain shot through his shoulder where he'd been grazed by a shard of metal, but he ignored it. Every second mattered. Above, the adult dragons circled, wings cutting through the artificial lights. Their growls reverberated, shaking panels and loose crates. One of them swooped down suddenly, its enormous head tilting toward him. Corrin froze, then realized it wasn't attacking. Its eyes were scanning him, testing his intent. He straightened slowly, hands empty, and whispered, "I won't let them get hurt. Not a single one." The tunnel's opening shimmered ahead, a sliver of safety. Corrin sprinted, clutching two hatchlings and leading the others in a makeshift line. Sparks rained from damaged conduits and loose panels swung violently, but he dodged, weaved, and lifted what he could. One hatchling flapped its tiny wings, its glow brightening like a beacon. Corrin's mind raced. The hatchlings were guiding him, signaling which path was safest. Then a sudden roar split the air. Debris shot past him as a massive adult dragon landed near the tunnel, blocking part of the path. Corrin's heart pounded. There was no way around. He froze for a heartbeat, then thought fast. The hatchling's glowing pulses seemed to respond to the dragon, syncing with its movements. Could they calm it? Could they communicate? He held the two hatchlings up gently. "It's okay," he whispered. "We're not a threat." The dragon's head tilted, massive eyes narrowing. Then something astonishing happened. The glowing pulses of the hatchlings intensified, sending waves of light and faint vibration across the dragon's scales. The creature's growl softened to a low, almost curious rumble. Corrin realized he had to trust them. Using every ounce of courage, he stepped forward, letting the hatchling's glow guide the adult dragon's attention. The creature leaned back slightly, creating a narrow path. Corrin sprinted, clutching the hatchlings as the others flitted close to the ground, their small bodies moving in perfect rhythm. Sparks and debris continued to rain around him, but the path held. A sudden panel swung down from above, grazing his shoulder again. Pain shot through his side, but he pushed forward, gritting his teeth. One hatchling squealed and he adjusted, shielding it with his exosuit. Each movement was precise, each second a gamble against collapse, fire, and the massive shadows above. The tension was unbearable, but Corrin refused to falter. Finally, they reached the inner chamber revealed by the console. It was a small, fortified storage pod with intact life support systems. Corrin slammed the door shut and activated the field generator. A soft hum filled the chamber, and the hatchlings immediately pressed close to him, scales dimming to a gentle glow. They were safe at least for now. Corrin's knees buckled as he sank to the floor, exhaustion overtaking him. Outside, the adult dragons hovered, wings spread like sails. Corrin watched, heart pounding, as one of the largest approached, massive talons careful not to touch the pod. Its eyes, intelligent, almost human in expression, locked with his. A low hiss escaped its throat, resonating with a strange rhythm. Corrin understood instantly. It was communicating, acknowledging his courage and compassion. He allowed himself a small, shaky smile. They had passed judgment on him, and he had earned their trust. The hatchlings chirped softly, wings fluttering against his chest, and Corrin felt a profound connection. Not just with the creatures he had saved, but with a species that had lived in the shadows of the galaxy, watching humans, evaluating them. Then as he caught his breath, a sudden tremor shook the pod. A small hatchling's glow flared violently, and the console in the corner activated without his touch. Symbols he didn't recognize lit up in sequence, revealing a holographic map of the farm, highlighting hidden tunnels and reserves. The hatchlings were showing him more than just survival, they were guiding him, teaching him. A gust of wind hit the pod, followed by the sound of wings slamming against metal. One of the dragons outside moved closer, and Corrin realized that if he could harness the trust he had just earned, he could lead the hatchlings to permanent safety. Every choice now mattered. A single mistake could undo everything. He whispered to the creatures, "Follow me. I've got you." The hatchlings chirped in response, pulsing brighter, and the other dragons shifted to form a protective perimeter. Corrin gritted his teeth, lifting the last few hatchlings as they prepared to move. The tunnel was their only escape, and outside forces, both human technology and alien instinct, would test every step. Corrin took one last deep breath, scanning the shadows above. The largest dragon let out a soft hiss, almost like a warning or a guide, and then stepped aside, wings beating slowly. He felt the weight of responsibility settle in his chest. He could not fail, not now, not after everything. As he stepped into the tunnel, the hatchlings pressed close, their glowing pulses lighting the path. Outside, the massive wings of the adult dragons fanned the air, shadows dancing across the walls. Corrin's jaw tightened. The night was far from over. And then, just as he reached the far end of the tunnel, a sudden flash of light illuminated the field beyond. Something moved in the distance, faster, larger than any dragon he had seen. Corrin froze. Whatever it was coming. Corrin stepped carefully into the hidden chamber at the end of the tunnel, hatchlings clutched close to his chest. The soft hum of life support systems and the faint glow of their scales filled the space with an almost peaceful light. His body ached, bruised from sparks and falling debris, but relief surged through him. All the hatchlings were safe, for the first time since the night had begun. He set them down gently on the floor, watching as they huddled together, wings trembling slightly. Their pulses glowed in rhythm, sending faint waves across the chamber's walls. Corrin knelt, brushing his hand over the softest scales, marveling at the creature's trust. "You're alive, because of me," he whispered. "I won't let anything happen to you." Outside, through the reinforced viewport, the adult dragons hovered, immense and silent, their wings slowly shifting in the low light. One of them, larger than the rest, with scales that shimmered like molten emerald, lowered its massive head and peered into the chamber. Corrin held his breath. Its eye, intelligent and piercing, studied him. For a long moment nothing moved. Then, almost imperceptibly, the dragon's massive head dipped, a gesture that felt deliberate, an acknowledgement of his courage and compassion. Corrin exhaled, trembling slightly. The hatchling stirred, chirping softly, wings brushing against him. One of the smaller dragons nudged his chest with its tiny snout, and he laughed quietly, a mix of relief and awe. They had accepted him. Not just as a protector but as something more, a trusted ally. Then, without warning, the largest adult dragon shifted, lifting a massive claw and revealing a small, glowing device nestled against the metallic floor. It pulsed faintly with an otherworldly light, clearly alien in design. Corrin's eyes widened. He understood instinctively, this was a gift, a reward. Not treasure in the human sense but something far more valuable. He approached cautiously, hands open. The dragon's claws didn't move to strike. The device floated slightly above the floor, guided by some force he couldn't see. Corrin reached out and took it. As soon as his fingers touched the surface, the chamber filled with a soft hum, and holographic schematics projected in the air. The device contained information on the farm, the hatchlings' biology, and advanced energy systems far beyond anything he had seen. This is incredible, Corrin whispered. He ran his hands over the controls, realizing it could enhance his hydroponic systems, stabilize the orbital farm, and even manipulate environmental conditions to help the hatchlings thrive. His mind spun with possibilities. This gift wasn't just a reward, it was an opportunity to create, to protect, to improve life for these creatures and countless others. The hatchlings chirped again, their pulses brightening in a rapid sequence. Corrin realized they were guiding him, encouraging him to use the device. Outside, the adult dragons remained still, massive forms silhouetted against the orbital horizon. One of them released a low, rumbling hiss, a sound that felt almost like approval. Corrin's heart swelled. Humans, he realized, could do more than survive. They could earn the respect of beings far older and wiser than themselves. Corrin carefully placed the hatchlings in the chamber's nutrient pods, watching as they relaxed and began to feed. Their scales dimmed slightly, a sign of calm and trust. He studied the holographic projections, learning quickly. The device contained protocols, environmental simulations, and subtle instructions on dragon care that were almost intuitive. It was as if the dragons had expected him to figure it out, and they had chosen him for his courage, empathy, and intelligence. For a moment, Corrin allowed himself to feel pride. Not arrogance, not triumph, but a deep, steady pride in what humans could do when faced with impossible odds. His hands were bruised, his body weary, yet his spirit felt alive in a way he had never experienced. This was more than survival. This was connection. A sudden flash caught his attention. Outside the viewport, distant lights flickered in space, unmistakably artificial. Corrin squinted, heart skipping. It wasn't another dragon. Something larger, faster, and more organized approached the orbital farm. The dragons outside tensed, wings beating faster, but they didn't leave. Instead, they hovered protectively over the hatchlings and him. Corrin's mind raced. Whatever was coming, it was beyond anything he had faced tonight. But he felt ready because he wasn't alone. He had the trust of these incredible creatures, the knowledge contained in the alien device, and the courage to act. Humans had a way of standing against the impossible, and he intended to prove it again. He looked down at the hatchlings, their tiny eyes bright and trusting. "We've come this far," he said softly, "and we're not stopping now. Whatever's out there, we face it together." Their glowing pulses responded in a quick, synchronized beat, almost like a promise. The largest dragon released another low hiss and lifted its massive wings, casting a protective shadow over the chamber. Corrin felt a surge of determination. The night had tested him, pushed him to his limits, and shown him the power of courage, empathy, and intelligence. Now, the dawn of something new was breaking, not just for him but for the hatchlings and maybe even for humanity. He adjusted the device in his hands, studying the holographic schematics once more. Outside, the approaching lights grew nearer, a reminder that the universe was vast and full of unknown challenges. Corrin tightened his grip on the hatchlings and took a steadying breath. Whatever was coming, he was ready. And somewhere, in the darkness beyond the orbital farm, a signal pulsed, a distant, alien pattern that suggested the story of these dragons and their human ally was only just beginning. The night had ended, but the adventure was far from over.